So this is the first scenario in Fighting Sail, and it's pitting the USS Chesapeake under Captain Lawrence against, let's see, the HMS Shannon, that's under Captain Broke. This is the famous battle in which the line "Don't give up the ship" was spoken soon before the surrender of the American ship. But Oliver Hazard Perry takes that as his flag eventually. Anyway, it's a strange motto to use for your fleet in some ways. What you've got here is a couple of relatively evenly matched ships. A little bit more gun on the Shannon, 55 versus 54. A little bit higher quality crew. But other than that, they're the same. The big difference here? Well, the wind. And if you look at the situation, you can see it. The Americans are actually, if that's correct, dead in the water there. Let's see, wind northwest, US force southeast. Yeah, so they're not even going to be able to move. And this is just going to be a chance to probably test out the combat system, but the American ship could get out of the irons and start moving about a little bit. Let's take a look at the... I don't think I have a cheat sheet for this. I'm sure I had one. Where we go. And the first thing we do is we make command decisions. Well, the Americans don't have a command decision to make, and the English, they want to close, and their means of doing so, they're an A sailor, most of the ships are A's, is they're going to be picking a port command. Now, each player has a handful of these, one of each command at a time. Just drawing out of here because, well, I didn't have it in place. And we check the wind value. Right now we're beating, which isn't terribly good, but that gives us 3 movement points with an A sailor. And we'll be able to close that distance. Now, studying sails is an interesting concept here, because the truth of the game is you almost always fire at the hull. Part of that's the penalty for firing at masts. I am not going to have any studded sails here, but I could test them out in some scenarios just to see the risk of having your movement allowance cut apart. You really become kind of helpless when that happens. So even though you're sunk by getting hit in the hull, I generally don't stud my sails. It's too dangerous a practice. I could see slipping away with it though at times. Alright, and now we actually go to our action stage. At this point, theoretically, these guys are just placed down there. Nobody knows what's happening, but then they're all revealed at once. And we calculate the movement allowance as we did. And we've got an allowance of 3. And now, the English don't have a lot of choices here. What they're going to do is we're going to, well, we get the weather gauge, which means we get to choose to move first or second. It doesn't have any real effect. We get to move here, and now the question is, how much do we want to turn? We have to turn either 1 or 2 spaces. I'm going to turn the 1 space, although 2 spaces would get me more movement points. Yeah, we'll do the 2 spaces. As long as the Americans are kind of locked in that position there, there's no real problem for us. Of course, they're not going to remain locked in that position because at some point or another, we have to worry, and no, I'm not shooting. In fact, I can't shoot. If you look at the firing arcs, if I can find them here, these are going to be, that's going to be in my bow blind side, cutting out across here. If I had moved to here, I could have opened fire initially, but I want to close ground, and that's why I did the turn that I did. But at some point or another, we have, what is it, drift. And I don't remember when that's resolved. If a ship has taken it back, it must drift. A ship that has drifted may not move for the remainder of the game turn. Okay, so I roll a die. On a 1 or a 2, it stays as it is. Yeah, actually this was rolled before the movement took place, after the commands were ordered. Anyway, a 1 or a 2, it's going to remain as it is. 3 or 4, it goes to port. 5 or 6, it's going to shift to starboard, and it goes 45 degrees. And now we're in line. We've got the American ship beating, and the English ship beam reaching, is it, or broad reaching? I can't remember which is which. That'll be broad reaching, which is the fastest movement. So the English are going to have the wind gauge again, and they're going to have a lot of control over the situation. I'm going to play with the basic wind gauge rules at this point. The optional ones aren't even supposed to be used in small ship scenarios. However, something kind of disturbs me when you don't use them. All right. Okay, so now the Brits passed on an opportunity last turn there. They could have gotten a shot off. And in fact, the Americans have as well. Both players have laid down their plans for the turn, and you can immediately see, like any plotted movement game, this isn't going to be real great solitaire, right? And I may not do all the scenarios because of that. My first thought was, oh, I love this game. But, you know, I love it when I'm playing opposed. So we flip these suckers over, and it doesn't really matter what you picked. Your speed is going to be determined. So we've got the Americans are beating. So they'll be going 3, and we're doing the big old broad reach there, which means we have 6 movement points. That means the Brits have the wind gauge. And now their question is, well, what do they want to do? Because they could move, turn, move, fire, and then force the Americans to move. Or they could force the Americans to move first. Now, if you were playing with the speed option, the Brits would have to take that first move. And in fact, after moving 2, they would have to take the second move as well. So you can kind of see where if you play with that option, it does really restrict the advantage of the wind gauge. So obviously I'm going to force the Americans to move first. They took a starboard action. So they'll turn a little this way. Now, this is, I'll keep some of these out here. This is maybe the Americans' only chance, well, it is their only chance to fire here. And I could fire at 3, 6, 8 points away. I'm going to do it. Just because next turn, the Brits are going to be back here. I'm probably not, I don't know. All right, I'll hold my fire. Okay. The reason is because I can do things like attack or aware to get out of here. So the Brits are going to move. Now, I have to do a port turn. That's going to be to that direction. So 2, 4, 6. Still legitimate for firing, I do believe. Bow blind side. No! Oh boy. And over here, I could swing and move right in, but I won't get a rake that way. I'd really like to get my rake in here. All right, I'll hold my fire as well. So you can see where it kind of becomes this weird little, I don't know, dancing type game, because you can only fire as you move. And you kind of expect, oh, look, come on, man. that shouldn't happen. And that is one of the difficulties with the game. You must move and then fire at all times. The chart wrong there. The blind side comes out the front, so the Brits are going to be able to get that shot in, and it's going to be a doozy there. So, my base firepower is 55. The rates of the two ships, they're both 5th rate, so they're even there. The range between them divided by 4, while the range is only 2 points, you got to be next to the guy to not get this penalty, so no penalty there. No damage. I'm not doing rigging fire. Certainly not at close range where the penalty comes in. I did not tack. This is not a rake. I would have liked to get a rake, but this is not going to be one. It is my first broadside. Let's see, 9.36. I think they're judged on a per side basis. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be my first port broadside. And that adds 20 because I'm at close range. I'm sorry, not adds. It adds 20 to the fire value. So right now I'm sitting at a 75, and I'll use the red as the tens digit. 66. Okay, that's doubles, so it gets a critical. But I only did one hit on the American ship. Kind of a problem here. You got to kind of track information on each ship. I was wrong about how much you got to write. So we got the Cheesy and the Shannon. And the Shannon's fired its port broadside. Now the Chesapeake has taken a hit. And now my critical. Well, let's go look up and see what we got here. The firing player immediately rolls a single die. On a 1 through 3, it's a wheel. 4 or 5, it's a mast. On a 6, you get to roll again. Okay, with the possibility of a fire on the second die roll. Okay, 5, we hit a mast. So we've taken a mast off the Chesapeake. And what that's going to do is the ship will be dropped to a maximum movement allowance of 4. And then that goes down to 3 if it's lost 2 masts. If it's lost all its masts, it's dead in the water. And we'll go to the next turn and figure out what the movements are. But that is a definite nice blow for the English. And by the way, you flip this over to indicate it's fired because you can only fire once per turn. It's not once out each broadside, it's once per turn. Which is kind of annoying. You'd think you could slide between 2 ships and fire out both sides. There was some discussion of why you can't do that in this one, if I recall. But a lot of games do allow that, and I think maybe it depends on the scale of the game as to whether the crew has time to man both sets of guns at once, because you would have like 3 to 4 guys on a gun, and you really couldn't just slip between and fire out both sides at once. But their chances are in a longer turn something like I'm trying to remember the name of the game, the Brilly Pot Flying Colors, the one everybody wants me to play. The time span may be long enough that you could actually be getting multiple shots off, perhaps, during a range of a turn. All right, well, on to the next turn. Okay, so now we are actually at the point where we flip these counters over, and both people place them hidden. That's going to be running as the wind's coming right behind it, and that works out to be a 4 from the chart. And this is going to be beating, so it ends up at 3. Now that would be important if speed was determinant in terms of the order of movement, but it's not in this scenario. So now the wind gauge is still going to be and I could give the extra little wind marker to the British player for this. It's still going to be in the British hands. And he's got a hard choice here. He wants to make a port turn. Weird honking outside. He wants to make a port turn, and he wants to get his shot off before the Americans do. So he's going to spend his 3 movement, take his port turn. That's the end of his movement here. And now he's allowed to take a shot. Now he already fired this broadside. It's nothing too exciting here. I believe, all told, the full value of this is just his 55 gunnery value. He gets a 55, and that's lucky. Another doubles, so another critical. He does another point of damage to the Chesapeake, and he gets to roll again on the criticals table. Let me see. We got another mast. So that's 2 masts down. Oh, I forgot. What is that? Max speed is what's affected by mast criticals, right? Yeah. So that's not too big a deal, but he's close to being dead in the water here. Now, that's the end of the British player turn. The Americans were tacking. They have a couple of options. They could either choose to do that tack, which is what they're going to do. If they switch to this, they'll be beating or running. If they do this, they're beam reaching, but then they'll be in that danger of fouling position. Of course, you can still avoid that foul. So this is actually how he wants to be, because he gets that 45-degree free turn next time. Except he can't shoot if he's like that. So we'll swing like this with our tack. And we're going to open up and fire. And this is a first fire. So it's going to give us 20 extra points to our firepower. I shouldn't flip that because I have to see that. So that puts me to 74, or sorry, 74. And then I also have one other factor in here, which is the damage I've taken. I've taken 2 hull hits, so that drops it by 10. So I'm down to 64. I get a 66, that's a miss. This is not going well for the Americans at all. And they're done. And that is actually the end of the 3rd movement. Time to select more checks. Well, here both sides have taken a port move. And now we got to see what the wind effect is. It's hitting both sides really right through with a beam reach. So the British movement will be 4. And so would the American movement, but for one thing. They're down 2 masts. So their movement's 3. That means the English still have the wind gauge. Now, with a movement of... I could force the Americans to move first, but I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do, and I can't go here or else I'll be right into the wind, so I'm going to go to here. And I'm going to unload once again with my port guns. And that used up 3 movement points, so I'm done there. And let's not flip this. 55, this is not a rake. Any other? I don't think there are any other issues here. This is straight up. And I miss. That puts it on the Americans. And, you know, I mean, it does become something of just a pure dice fest when you have a couple of ships patrolling around like this. The initial setup gives you something, but now I've got a port move here. So that costs me 3, and I can shift like this. That gets me, I'm not going to be able to get a lot of speed, so that gets me a little bit more angled in towards the Brits. And now I'm at a range of two 5 movement points, so that's minus 10 to my fire. Another minus 10 for the 2 hull hits, right? It's every 2 that hurts you. So that's minus 20, and I should have the port fire marked on each of these. So we're at minus 20 there, and minus 20 puts me down to 34. I'm outgunned at this point, but that's okay. I roll a 12. That's not 40 points under, so all I do is a hull hit to the Shannon. And obviously I'm not shooting up rigging here. And now we're up to another turn, and we got to keep track of these because every 8, there's that kind of administrative phase where some neat stuff can happen. On Revelation, this is really where the excitement in the game comes. I've got a port turn there, no big shock there, turning it on my opponent. That's kind of pretty standard. I'm running. That's going to put me down to my maximum of 3. For the Shannon, 2 things. One, I'm beating, right? Which means my movement's also only going to be 3. But I've chosen to do a wear, which means I'll be rotating around and blowing up with the wind. I'm counting on the US pushing towards me, and I want to rotate my ship. So now I just roll off, and I'm going to give odds. The Brits get the wind gauge, even the Americans. The Americans get the wind gauge. What do they want to do? They've got to move into this space if they move. They're going to allow the Brits to go first. And now, here's the problem. This is a starboard broadside. The distance is between 4 and 6 to 4. So they only get 10 added. They lose that 10 for the range. So they're at a straight 55. I'm going for the hull again. Although actually, if I went for rigging, I could make this thing go dead in the water. That's tempting. That would be another minus 10 though, and I'd have to get 2 hits to make it dead in the water. So I'll just go for hull some more. I get a 21, that's below. That's going to be a hit on the Chesapeake. And now it's the Chesapeake's turn, and here's what's ugly. I shouldn't have done this. I'll turn like this. I'm not sure I have an angle of fire there, do I? Yeah, I do. I still do. All right. And that is also not, obviously, if I can shoot him, he can shoot me. That's not going to be a rake. So I'm still firing out my port side here. That's at 54. Minus 10 puts me to 44. I don't think I have any advantages there. And I miss again. Now we're at the start of the 6th turn. Here, with the 2 ships kind of going straight for each other, is one of those positions where playing it solo really kind of hurts, because the thinking I put through, okay, it doesn't really matter with the Brits. They're going to get the wind gauge, be able to move here and unload. They're going to take a starboard, and let's see. Looks to me like they're broad reaching, so they get a big 6 movement points. That's going to allow them to kind of turn fairly significantly if they like. But here with the Americans, they don't know where the Brits want to end up. They could do anything and probably end up turning and moving through. Of course, with the wind gauge the way I'm playing it, the Brits are going to be able to get out of there a little quicker than they would be if we did enforced movement. No, they're getting hit. Looks to me like they're also broad reaching, but they can only go 3 because of their lack of sails. So now the Brits have their option, and they're taking a starboard move as well, figuring that the Brits will be passing them by and they want to catch up. The Brits definitely want to go first. And now the question is, what do you want to do about it? And a turn like this makes sense. I'm going to open fire. Now that cost me 2 movement points, so I'm down to 4. I'm only going to get 1 more move. But here, I'm going to open fire. Yep. This is a starboard broadside. I've already fired that out. I have really no penalties. I'm going to get a rake though. This is a regular bow rake, so it's only plus 10. So I think I'm at 65. That sounds about right. I get a 33. That's just 1 hit. But again, it's doubles. And if I take another mast down, that ship's toast, basically. It's not another mast, or it might not be. So on a 1, 2, or 3, it's a mast. On a 4, 5, or 6, it's going to be they're catching on fire. They're on fire now. Okay, so what happens when you're on fire? It takes an immediate another hull hit. That puts them up to 5 hull hits. Now, they're only a 5th raider. So that is all the hits that they can actually take. We'll get to that in a moment. But a ship abandons once it takes 10 minus its rate, and then it'll strike because it's close. So this is over at this point. But the fire would also do the following. When we hit that 8th turn, which is coming up soon, there's a chance this thing's going to blow up. It's probably too battered at this point for the Brits to take it along. But whatever. I don't know if there's really a victory. There is a victory condition set up for this somewhere. There we go. The winner is the player who gets the most victory points, which are going to be captured and retained prizes. If a ship blows up, however, it's considered a prize for this. It's worth victory points equal to 10 minus the rate. And the game can end up in a draw. So, kind of no matter what, we're going to have 5 victory points here. Either the fire's going to be put out or the ship's sunk. And we've got a win here for the Brits. And that is the end of this scenario. The don't give up the ship scenario. I don't know whether to put it down as that with the title or to put it down as Chesapeake versus Shannon. Some of the later ones, I want to put down the battle title. But, alright.